beauty will save the world. And everyone looked at the guy who said that in his novel and said, "You're mad."
You're mad.
No,
He's right,
it's
though.
actually, there's actually great truth. And it's one of the things we're missing in our world today. We talk about truth, but it's all these factual, this, my idea, my perspective on things. But beauty kind of brings a little balance to that and helps us to orient as I make decisions based on what is truly beautiful, healing and good, and makes this world a more wonderful place. It changes how I look at things. It changes how I act. It changes what I do.
Welcome to the Become Who You Are podcast, a production of the John Paul II Renewal Center. I'm Jack Riggert, your host. So glad for all the young people joining us, too. That's Claymore. That's our logo behind me, the Claymore sword made famous by William Wallace and Braveheart. These young guys that we're speaking to, they know something's up. Something's wrong. They don't know quite what it is, and we're inviting them into this beautiful story. I'll give you a little background here. I am with Erik Stensland. Erik wrote this incredible book. Actually, he's a landscape photographer. And then he put this beautiful prose to this book. I'm in Estes Park, and part of the Rocky Mountain National Park, there to do some hiking and some sightseeing. I walk into a bookstore with my wife, and I see this beautiful book on the shelf, and I have not put it down since, and that was some months ago. I invited Erik on the show. So, Erik, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, it's a real pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You know, when specifically talking about this young audience, Erik, their beauty is missing in so many of their lives. They're so busy with stuff, and some of them are starting to slow down just long enough to say, what's going on? What is the purpose and meaning to my life? I want to get them outside. I want to get them just to walk through. I don't care if it's the forest preserved down the street. And I thought, I'm going to introduce them to this incredible photographer and author, Erik Stensland, to talk a little bit about this. And Erik, if you had to pick one picture and one prose, something that you wrote of from this beautiful book, The Journey Beyond, Learning to Live Beautifully in a Troubled World. And when I edit this, I'll put it up behind me there, so we'll have the picture of that book up behind me. If you had to pick out one picture, and it would be difficult to do, I don't know how you would do it, or something that you wrote there, just to talk about this that captures that journey beyond for you, could you do it?
Yeah, well, every picture in there has a really special memory for me, whether it's standing at the edge of, standing on a cliff in the Grand Canyon in a remote area for 4 hours waiting for the sun to set, or all these different places. But if I was to maybe choose a picture that kind of defines what this book is about, I probably would choose this. It's definitely not one of my best photos, but it's this lone, stark little white church sitting on a hill in Iceland. And I'm there in mid-December, which means it's dark all the time, except for from 11 a.m. till about 1 p.m. The sun just crests the horizon. But this church is perched up on a hill where it can, despite the almost constant darkness, you can see the light just at the edge of the ocean in the distance. And for me, that's kind of how I wrote this book, thinking we live in challenging, even dark and difficult times. And it's all about, how do we not just look out at the darkness, but how do we look and find those little glimmers of light that are out there on the horizon that give us hope and help us to live more meaningful lives in the midst of the challenges?
Thank you for that. When at night, what I've done now is I put your book with a couple other books I like to read kind of at night as I'm unwinding. And man, you do it. You hit it. I can meditate on that, on something you wrote there. It's amazing. How did your own search for meaning lead you from burnout, you talked about at one time in your life, to healing in the Rockies? Because we have these young people I wouldn't say they're burnt out, but they're anxious. They're nervous. They have this ache inside, and they're always just noise and noise and noise. And and how did you do it? And how did you, how did you get into the depth of not only taking these beautiful pictures, but again in that prose? There's a lot of wisdom. There's a lot of wisdom.
Wisdom gained through pain and suffering.
I was going to say that's usually where it comes from, doesn't it? Yeah.
Most of the time, I don't really wish it on anyone, and yet,
Yeah.
yeah, that's where you can find things. But yeah, I guess for me, I graduated from college, and I wanted to change the world. I wanted to do big things and important things, and gave myself to working primarily overseas, living in the Balkan Peninsula, in Albania and Kosovo, and doing all these, running these organizations and starting refugee agencies and doing just all sorts of crazy things. But I worked myself. I was well known throughout the region, worked day and night. We started a refugee agency that became the largest in the Kosovo War, ended up going in and um,
What
coordinating.
years? What years were that? What was that,
I
Eric?
was in the Balkans from 92 to about 2003, I think.
Can you give our audience just a little history, a little background on what was going on then?
Sure. Yeah, it's a complicated area of the world. And the Balkan Peninsula is just east of Italy. You're looking across the Adriatic at the former Yugoslavia, Albania, Kosovo. You've got northern Macedonia and a lot of areas. But communism had just fallen when we moved in, and great poverty, great ethnic tensions. We ended up having huge wars going on throughout the former Yugoslavia as it disintegrated from one nation into many different nations. And yeah, I was kind of right in the middle of it. I'd spent my high school years fascinated with Balkan history. And so I knew all the ins and outs and the relationships between all these people. But yeah, we were there. And so stuck kind of in the middle of the Kosovo War, I was quite engaged with.
A lot of brutality there. A lot of brutality there. I could see not only that your work, but also what you saw probably could give you a pretty good case of burnout, Eric, couldn't it?
Yeah, it was that. It was all the work that we were doing. It was the ugly hate that surrounded everyone and everything
Mm.
during the war period. It was my best friend who was working with me, uh, died while working with me out there at age 27, and leaving a wife and two kids. Yeah, it's just a lot of different things happened. But the main thing is I just didn't take care of my inner world. And I ended up kind of having a breakdown, just in terrible state. I needed to get out of there, and took a short break to back to the US and started to think about things and realized I'm empty. I'm doing a lot of good things, but I have nothing inside. I'm just hollow, and started to rethink things and went back to ground zero of what's important, what's real. Is any of this faith that I have real, or is it just something in my head? And started digging into it and trying to figure out, well, what's really there. And what I realized is what was there was this deep ache and yearning. And I didn't fully understand it, but I started by looking into all the science and all of that and found it could only get me so far. But as I followed that yearning and what is it actually asking of me, it took me on this journey, uh, this hunger for goodness, this hunger for purpose, hunger for meaning, and this little life of mine to have real significance, because I saw that I was doing a lot of good things, but really it wasn't as significant, and I was falling apart. There had to be a better way to live.
Mm. And so we speak about this a lot in the work that we do, that you could have the best intentions and do the best things in life, but you got to be filled. Something's got to fill you up. And I think at the end, what these young people are sensing true, this is innate in us, isn't it, Erik? This desire for all that's true, good, and beautiful. The philosophers would talk about, huh? And we search for that. What is the truth of things? What is the meaning and purpose of my? Who am I? And this is innate. What happens with these young people is the same thing that happened to many of us. You're describing it too. We jump out there and we want to do good things. We want to act, but somehow we can't give what we don't have. Over time, we're going to burn out, so we got to receive, huh? Somehow you figured out a way to do that, and that's what I would love to help you to help these young people do. When I was a young guy, Erik, I was a backpacker. I loved to ride a bike. I still love all those things. And I knew I was going to find, without really understanding it, I was going to find some peace in the woods, in nature. You say nature is a teacher, but most of these young people are glued to these screens, not trails. And I wanted to give them a little advice because I want them to try this. I want to take your book, read it, and then tomorrow morning, don't plan a 2-year vacation 2 years away. I want you to go out and find a forest tomorrow. For someone who's never hiked alone or even sat in silence for 10 minutes, how can a single encounter with the wilderness, right, begin to rewire their sense of awe, wonder, and identity? How can they just, boom, let's be a little quiet. Let's just go take a walk outside. What does it do for you? And you're a mentor, Erik, and I want them to hear from you.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that a microdose of nature is going to rewire you.
No.
In fact,
and that's a good point. I shouldn't have said, rewire all at once, right? I should have said the spark that will put you on a journey. You're right.
Yeah,
You're right.
yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, and I think part of it is we have all these addictions to technology, to information, to keeping up with all of our friends and people and everything going on. And it's a little bit of releasing a sense of control. And it's a scary, scary thing to do for people. But I would encourage everyone to go for a quiet walk in the natural world. Just 10-minute walk in a forest by yourself, no music, no phones, no nothing. And it's going to make you so uncomfortable and you're going to hate it probably so much. But it's, an interesting thing. I speak a lot about solitude, and
Yeah,
there've been a lot of studies about it. A study in the Journal of Science, that's the name of the journal, Science, in 2017, they did a test where they brought people in, put them in a room by themselves for 15 minutes. Nothing else was in the room except for one button that they were told would give them a shock if they pushed it. And it actually did. It's a 5 out of 10 on the pain scale. And people couldn't stand their own boredom, so they would push the button and shock themselves.
Oh, my gosh.
And men would do it more consistently than anyone, and they would repeatedly shock themselves rather than deal with the quiet of boredom. And, and so we're terrified of silence. We're terrified to be alone, while it's the very thing that we probably most need in life. Blaise Pascal, the 14th century philosopher and mathematician, who I'm sure you know very well. He said, humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. And
Isn't that amazing?
What does he mean? What is this about? Why are we so afraid of that inner world? And what I've come to realize is that we have this vast inner world. I think of us kind of like the TARDIS in Doctor Who, if you've ever seen the old show running for many years.
Forgot about that show.
Bigger on the inside than on the outside. And that's the way our inner worlds are. But what we've done is we've taken all of our pain, every failure, every wound, junk in our life, and we've stuffed it into that quiet place. And then when we go out into somewhere silent or quiet, that all comes to the surface. And that, I think, is the very reason we avoid the silence.
Wow, what a good analogy that is. Yeah, that could be a little overwhelming for someone, can it?
But
Especially
yet,
somebody that's been hurt, or abused, and who
absolutely.
hasn't in this pornographic, crazy culture we're in.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. But the interesting thing is, if we can find a way to bring all of that junk out into the light with a therapist or a pastor or priest, or even just if it's, not too traumatic, just ourselves, bringing it out into the light and looking at it, it loses a lot of its power. And that empty place inside of us becomes this place of peace and a place of safety and a place of healing and transformation, where we hear that gentle whisper calling out to us. But we got to deal with that junk first, and that's not a lot of fun. So those
No,
first years in the wilderness could be a little.
yeah, that's why I think a forest might be a good way to start because I remember my son when he lives out in Colorado, and so we're out there often. He's in Highlands Ranch just
Yeah.
south of Denver, and I have a brother in Littleton, and so we get out there quite a bit. And when he was young, I took him backpacking a couple times, and I said, Jake, are you okay with this quiet? And he wasn't at first. He said, I don't like it. And it just took him a little while. And I bring it up because you can be very uncomfortable in the beginning, but you got to sit in the ache. I always tell these young guys, just sit in the ache. And, if you open that ache up, to your point, let some of the stuff fly out, and then maybe even invite, if you're a believer, invite God into that space where you go real deep, and there's just two people there, you and God, and you open up that interior life, like you said. It's so beautiful. But here's what I like about nature, and you describe it so well in the book. At one point, one of my favorite points, you were sitting in silence, and I should have marked all these. You were sitting in silence, and you hear the wind. I don't know if you remember this, but I remember that. So in Kings in the Old Testament, this prophet goes out, and he's searching, and the earthquake comes, and the storm comes, and all this, and then he finds God in the tiny whispering sound, the tiny whispering sound. So you talk about the wind, and you're sitting there, and you expect, you were talking about silence, and then you were sitting there for a few minutes, and now you start to hear the wind. And I've done this in Estes Park too, because I don't know how the wind comes around the mountains, but it'll start to blow, and you can almost hear it from a ways away. But you say something so cool in there, I can't do justice to it, but it like vibrated on the needles, in the trees and different things, and makes this sound, and then it would fall away, and then you could start to hear it come again. And those kind of things are going on all around us, so we don't really hear those, do we?
Well, there's so much happening in the wilderness, and that's one of the big things you can do to help quiet your crazy racing mind when you're out there in the quiet, is just start to pay attention, whether it's to the bark of a tree or to what's going on with some you see some ants crawling around, or there are beautiful things happening everywhere if you just stop and start to pay attention to it. And as you focus on any one thing in the natural world, your mind starts to empty out, your spirit calms down, there's a peace that starts to develop. And I'll guarantee you, if you start to do that on a regular basis, you will become a more peaceful person, a more content person, and it will begin to change who you are. It will rewire you over time to it in a very different way.
Yeah, and like you said, you mentioned all these addictions. Every young guy that we meet has had some dealing with pornography now, and the problem, Eric, is I call it stolen innocence. It's really not their fault. They hear something in the culture in school when they're 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. They Google it, and they get caught into this before they know it. They get caught, and their innocence was actually stolen from them. I think one of the ways to get it back again is to walk in the awe and wonder of the great prose that you're writing and other people have written, but also the beauty at the same time. What you've done in this book, and I'm just not pushing a book here. I'm pushing the beauty of nature, and also you've put this wisdom to it, And so tell us where you got that from. This is coming from deep within your heart. And when I'm reading this, I'm connecting to this, as an old backpacker that sat out there by myself, sometimes very scary. Sometimes, you hear noises and man, the demons start to, go around for me. I'm thinking I'm going to get attacked by a bear or the devil out here. It's scary by yourself, but you've spent a lot of time outside. How did you overcome this? And here's the distinction I want to make. There's a difference between solitude and loneliness. Solitude and loneliness, and I'm not saying a guy should go backpacking by himself. In fact, if you're new to this, you shouldn't. Probably you should go with one or two people, but still walk, a few feet, a little ways apart, so that you can still almost sense the silence with somebody else. But there's a difference between solitude and loneliness, and you make this point really well.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a distinction between solitude and loneliness. Loneliness is oftentimes due to a sense that if I just have this other person nearby, they will affirm me. They will fill that hole that I have within me. I need. And you're seeking that in other people, and yet solitude is a deliberate choice to say, I'm going to take some time and be alone, and I'm going to find that that wholeness that I'm looking for, that I've got that big hole inside of me, and I'm looking to fill it, and I'm going to find that in the silence. And when you do, you come back and you have relationships that you can pour into, and you become a fountain rather than seeking to receive. But yeah, that time in nature, for me, it's all about getting to a point where we can listen to that quiet whisper, and it is calling out to us, it's calling our name, and it's calling us into goodness, into wholeness, into beauty. And for me, beauty's been a real metaphor for my life. It's been a kind of a guide over the last 20 years or so. When I came out of being completely broken and fallen apart after my years working overseas, beauty became what I started to pursue. And
how old were you then?
I probably was 34.
Okay, so this is, you've gone through this for a while at this point. Right? Were you married at that time yet?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So this is affecting a lot of things.
It affects everything. It's changed my world. And I look back and think, boy, I'm so glad I crashed. I'm so glad I had that horrible falling apart that I did back then, because it's led me to reconsider my life and find what's really true and meaningful. And beauty has been kind of that one of those guiding paths for me. And we think of beauty, and as men, we kind of go, yeah, not really into that. But it's beyond just an outward appearance of something. It is it is far, far deeper. There is beauty in the actions of a person who does something brave or selfless in service to another person. There is beauty in a mathematical formula. There is, beauty is this bigger thing than we'd like to make it. We think of beauty as glamour, like the paint job on a car that you can just scratch, and something substantial, something deep. And I think of it as a mystery that we're called to pursue. As Dostoevsky wrote in one of his novels, beauty will save the world. And everyone looked at the guy who said that in his novel and said, "You're mad."
Yeah, you're mad. He's right, though.
There's actually great truth. And it's one of the things we're missing in our world today. We talk about truth, but it's all these factual, this, my idea, my perspective on things. But beauty kind of brings a little balance to that and helps us to orient as I make decisions based on what is truly beautiful, what is truly healing and good and brings makes this world a more wonderful place. It changes how I look at things. It changes how I act. It changes what I do. And so, yeah, beauty's kind of that guide for me.
Yeah, when I ask young guys, we talk about beauty, I said, okay, who is the most beautiful creature in the world that's ever been created? And they get it, Erik. They say a woman, but it reminds me of what you said. She's a mystery too. And you also said this. You said, I see the beauty, but you're called into a deeper story. And when we talk to young guys today, like again, I mentioned just this pornographic culture. We say when you look at a woman, you see her outer beauty. She is a mystery, the mystery of love, the mystery of goodness, the mystery of that beauty. She's calling you into a story of the heart. And if you can open yourself up, and that's what you're talking about, nature, beauty, goodness, it allows you to see another person or to see the stars and allow your heart to be called up into that beauty. Nothing like the beauty of a woman to do that, where you can get to a point, Erik, not to push down your passions and desires, not to indulge them, but to open it up and say, thank you, Jesus, for the beauty of that woman. I offer her up to you. Thank you for drawing me into something bigger. And it takes work. And I think nature and this connection that you're doing with your work through photography and this prose is bridging that gap, inviting people into a bigger story to see the beauty around us and allow them to open themselves up to that larger beauty, because this is healing. We need this, Erik, because we're all broken. What you mentioned with your brokenness, everybody I meet today is maybe not in the same way, obviously, right? And everybody's got their own stories, but man, we need this. And I think your work is a bridge to allow us to go out even further.
Yeah, I agree. We live in a very superficial society. And as I said, it started for me with trying to figure out what's real, what's substantial, what's going to stick around, what gives meaning. And that whole idea of beauty ends up being one of those things. The other thing, and you mentioned it, is that the issue of desire. Because we all have these desires for different things. But the funny thing is, I used to think I needed to suppress my desires. Now I've realized, no, actually, I need to understand what is it I'm really desiring? Because I think it's this thing, but actually it's underneath it. It's deeper. It's something more, because you get that fancy car. Okay, now I'm bored with it. What was I really looking for?
Yeah. And now you got to pay for it.
Was it respect from other people? Well, why do I want that? What's underneath that? And as you keep going down to the core of what is the desire beneath the desire, I think then you can redirect and reorganize your life in a way that'll actually be filled with meaning and happiness, and you won't be content with all of those superficial things that we thought we wanted.
We have to quit being consumers of just, and when I mean consumerism, not just look at I need a car to get to work. We need certain things, but we got to stop being just consumers just to consume, don't we? We have to put that aside, get out into the woods, start to read beautiful literature, start to bring beauty and goodness into our lives, don't we? And I just want to scream at the top of my lungs, quit buying stuff you don't need. Quit you're in nature, you're an outdoor guy. We have to take care of the environment, and you bring this out too. But we can do these things if we stop consuming all these plastic bottles and just do our part. Start looking at creation as, hey, I'm going to take some responsibility for this. Not just, this isn't climate porn, right? This climate fear, all around us. But yet we do have to take care of the environment, don't we?
We've seen horrendous things happening in the natural world. Yeah, I'm speaking all the time about what we're seeing happen in our natural world, the loss of species and the just devastation of the wild world. We just think it's endless. But
how you bring up some practical things. How would you say talk to young people that are just here, climate fear, don't have kids, don't form families, blah 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 blah, versus the way you approach it? I have a sense, I don't know everything about you, of course, but I have a sense that you think there's some real practical things we can all do to be cognizant of the environment and also do some positive things without just being fearful and distraught and bring a darkness into our own lives.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, there are a lot of problems in our world, including all the issues with the well-being of our natural world. But I find that people will choose one of two paths. They'll say either it's all doom and gloom, or I'm not going to look at the bad stuff. I'm just going to look at the good stuff. And somehow we need to walk in between those two poles of honestly recognizing, yeah, this is
Yeah.
bad. And
Yeah.
yeah, here's the really good stuff over here as well. And how do we hold these two things together?
Mm.
Um, my favorite environmental activist would be John Muir.
Ooh.
Everybody loves John Muir.
I hiked the John Muir Trail in through Yosemite, the Pacific Crest, all the way from Canada to Mexico, and I got on that and I started to read about John Muir. What a special guy, huh?
Amazing guy. He led to the start of our whole national park system in a way. He had a real big impact on a lot of the thinking in those early days. What I loved about John Muir is that he was facing a lot of environmental challenges in Yosemite National Park, and even before it was a national park. And yeah, he pointed those out. But what he did more than that, and was more successful at, was telling the story of a little squirrel and how its life and in a tree. And he would talk about an individual tree and how it grew and what it did. And he would write these articles for the papers that help people fall in love with the natural world. And if you fall in love with a place, you're going to care for it. And he understood that it's not by saying you should, you ought, you must, you shouldn't, all of these things, they don't get us very far. But a different attitude, one where we are able to pay attention to what we already have and what is good and worth protecting, and fall in love with it and share our enjoyment and love with other people. It creates a passion in people to, yeah, we got to take care of this stuff. This is important.
When you came back, so you're 30, in your early 30s, let's call it, and you're looking for a new path. Was there a catalyst, Erik, for you that turned it, or was it what kind of process was that? Because we have a lot of young guys again. They're on that path, and they're looking like, and sometimes there is a catalyst. Something comes into their life, and sometimes they just have to be aware that they're actually being led by divine providence if they pay attention, and to allow their pain and suffering to open this up somehow. It'll open up paths, won't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, that pain and suffering can be your greatest gift. For me, I realize I never thought I would end up doing what I'm doing. This is just
You didn't.
hard for me. No, I never imagined it.
So when you're in the Balkans, you weren't just taking pictures and into photography and stuff. So
No.
tell us a little bit about that. You bridged that.
Well, I was in the Balkans and falling apart, and a friend of mine called me on the phone and said, "Hey, I know you're helping to coordinate 134 organizations or whatever. Do you know anyone over there who's struggling and who just like a break?" I said, "Well, yeah, I know a lot of people like that." But what he didn't know is a few days before I had prayed and I said, "God, I need to get out of here. I need a break. And if I could have my way, I want to be out in the mountains, up on a mountain. I'd like a trail nearby, and I need high-speed internet because I want to do a master's program." And this friend called and said, do you know anyone out? And I said, "Yeah, I think I might. Tell me about this place." He said, "Well, it's in edge of Rocky Mountain National Park, up in the mountains." I said, "Oh, interesting. Is there a trail nearby?" He says, "Yeah, there's one just up the street." I said, "Okay." I said, "Does it have high-speed internet access?" He said, "She works for Time Warner over the internet, the person that's letting this place. I bet there is internet." I said, "Well, then I know someone who'd like this place." And my wife and I moved out there a little later, thinking it would be a short break. And once I got to Colorado, I soon realized we didn't have enough funding to keep us afloat. We were just going to be back for a year or so. And so I need to get a job. And I thought, I'm burned out. I don't want to be in a cubicle. I don't want to be running an organization. I need something that's going to restore me. And nature restores me. How could I get paid to hike? And I worked from that premise.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
looked at different options for how I could get paid to hike. And one day I walked into one of the local art galleries, and they had some photographs from the area. And I said, who takes these photos? And the person working said, oh, yeah, this person. I said, I wonder if I should become a landscape photographer to earn a living. And they said, oh, it would be impossible to make a living here as a full-time nature photographer. And so that night I went home and thought, that sounds like a challenge. I'll do that.
I love that.
So I had a dummy
Wow.
guide and taught myself photography and started a business.
Isn't that wild? Now, did you do some guiding, or did you take people on hikes and stuff? How did you transition between, there's a little learning curve there, Erik.
I spent a lot of time in the local library looking at art books, trying to understand how they painted or how they made photographs, or how they composed them, and where the light was coming from. Then I would go out and take pictures, and I met this group online, Nature Photographers Network, and submitted a photo and say, is this good? Is it bad? And they would critique it, and I would go take another one, and they would critique it. But part of my early business plan was, I thought, okay, my goal then is to become Mr. Rocky Mountain National Park and photograph all 415 square miles of Rocky Mountain National Park. And so I set out to do that. And
what did your wife think at this point? Did she think, uh-oh,
she was nervous.
Yeah.
Me heading out into the mountains in the middle of the night, just about every day. And I was doing a master's program, had a young child.
When you say master's program, what were you studying?
Organizational development.
Okay. So something different.
International nonprofits. So.
Okay. And you have a child at that time? You have a boy or a girl?
Young boy, it was just born just after we got here. And
so this is pretty courageous, I would think, right? You have a wife. You're starting a whole something totally different. You've got a little baby, so it's not like you can just completely roll the dice. So this is a good story.
Stupid. But yeah, I didn't know how much work it was going to be. I'm supposed to be recovering from a breakdown, and here I am trying to do a master's program and working day and night. I would be up at 3 most mornings and and then when I opened my gallery, then I would run that till 8 in the evening and then be out again. And yeah, it was hard going. We barely made it. But I fell in love with this park and fell in love with the natural world in a way far beyond what I ever thought possible. I always thought those crazy nature lovers, were just a bit over the top. And I fell in love myself with the natural world and found myself passionately wanting to protect these places. And,
yeah, for sure.
And
I remember, backpacking I had a little plastic bag on one side where I could reach it. And if I saw a cigarette butt or something there, you pick it up, don't you? And you put it away. Erik, I have a sense that you understand very well there's some dark elements in the world out there. Yet you're bringing this beauty and goodness in, and you have this great depth. Tell us how you're seeing this, because, you mentioned before, the balance, right? Not despair, but not. I'm just not going to push the despair aside and see the good. I mean, we're realists. There's some kind of a. Do you sense this spiritual battle that's going on around us, and yet at the same time, we can't give in to despair. And what nature does, and what goodness does, and what beautiful books do, is they show us something's wrong. Don't fall into this despair because there's nothing there. Lift yourself up and look at this is a temporal life, right? We're not here forever. You got to find meaning and purpose and do some good things, don't you?
Yeah, and I really think that pulling away into the natural world, spending some time alone, gives you a chance to kind of process and say, okay, stand back. What's the bigger picture here? What's really going on? because we can get so wrapped up in supporting a party or an idea or ideology or this or that. And we need to step outside of all that and step outside of all these little boxes to see the bigger picture of what's going on. And as I said, as I look at it, we as the majority of people in this country live shallow, rather meaningless lives.
Henry David Thoreau, huh?
Yeah,
Most men lead lives of quiet desperation, and I think he's right.
he's very
He's
right.
right.
And yet we can't see it in ourselves because we're so caught up in the activity and the noise
Yeah, we are.
that's going on. If we can pull it back a little bit and start to see the bigger pictures, we begin to be transformed, and we kind of become a little bit like outsiders in this. We don't fit in either political
Amen,
party.
brother.
We don't fit in any of the boxes. But I think at that point we can start to give some meaning and perspective on the bigger, more important things, and we can become the type of people that can make this world a better place. For me, it's changed from a focus on changing the world to realizing my own need for continued transformation and change, and the outflow of that has been greater than when I was out trying to make big things happen. And yeah.
You say that this path of wholeness always begins with an honest look within. I'm Catholic, and so John Paul II. I love John Paul II. He was our old Polish Pope for 27 years, and he said the first battle every man has to understand, man meaning men and women, have to understand is on the battlefield of the heart. That between being a self-giving person and a grasper, right? Someone that is a gift to others, and someone who's lusting and selfishness, right? Lusting for sex and money and power, whatever. And you have to be able to see that what's going on around you, and then fight that battlefield of the heart, and be filled with divine life and love, and then become that in the world. So it does start. It starts in the heart, and the heart is not in an island, but it's connected to everything else. And I think what you're talking about is bridging that. Bridging that heart. I step out, and I want to fill myself with beauty. We determine ourselves by what we see, what we take into our senses, into our heart. And that's why I was so drawn to your work, Erik, because right away I got all these things on my mind, and I see the beauty in your pictures. Tell us where you came up with that prose, though. Those beautiful words just seemed, and I know that it probably took more work than it seems, but every page it's got this beautiful picture, and then you write something on it pertaining to what you can see in this photograph. I mean, where did that come from? That's just really beautiful. I guess it's all of this that we're talking about here, right?
Yeah, I suppose it comes from 20 years of wandering quiet trails by
Yes.
myself in the middle of the night and thinking and praying. But yeah, that's just kind of become my style. Third book in this series is off to the
Yeah. So
prep.
talk about that as we're winding down here. Tell our audience where they can where they should get this book. I think what it does is it does what you said. Instead of just being left or right, I'm pro this, I'm anti this. You have to become above the fray, because as human beings, we have a tendency to push so far this way. And that's what these young people are doing. They're seeing that this world of consumerism, capitalism, unless it has a moral, ethical base to it, just becomes greed too. So what do? They vote for a communist mayor, say in New York, and now we're pushing the other way, right? Because this doesn't work, so that works. What you're talking about, what you just said a little bit, we got to go above that a little bit and say, hey, let me find out who I am, how the world's supposed to work, and maybe I could do something good within it, right? And whatever that means to different people in your job, your vocation, the people that you love around you. And of course, you have to love our country and say, hey, we've been given a lot of great resources. Let's do some good things out there, right?
Yeah, yeah, it does. It starts with going within and being willing to look at yourself honestly. Is even the things that sometimes seem like the best things that we hold on to inside of ourselves have motives behind them. You realize later and go, oh, I didn't realize. Yeah, okay. And so my life has become a life of letting go. And the funny thing is, it seems like it's constant giving up and it's constant death, but it's actually just the opposite. I find out I'm letting go of the things that are destroying me, that are choking me, that are keeping life from flowing through me. And so it's just for me, oh, I've got to deal with this now. Oh, I didn't see this in my life. And as I let go of the things in my own life, I see our world with more grace and more compassion and care, and feel like, yeah, well, we can live a life that actually has meaning and brings hope to people around me. And I think all of us can do that, but we got to step out of the rat race. Got to step out.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Tell us a little bit about your studio, where they can look at these books. I know is this part of a trilogy, Erik? The one I'm talking about, is that the second book in the trilogy, or so? Tell us about how that works.
Talking about Journey
I'm gonna hold
Beyond.
this one up.
Yeah,
this is a beautiful cover too. This is the second one.
That's the second one.
Okay.
Yeah,
and the first one is
Whispers in the Wilderness.
Okay. And how does that differ than this one? That was the
first book, Whispers in the Wilderness, and that's my most popular book. All the photos are from Rocky Mountain National Park, and it's an introduction to our inner world and through the natural world. The second book here is about, I should retitle it and call it The Journey Beyond Ourselves. It's stepping outside of that inner world to engage with an ugly world outside.
Well, I love the caption underneath, learning to live beautifully in a troubled world.
Exactly.
I think that's, I don't know if you can get much better than that, but that's just my opinion.
The subtitle.
Well, the subtitle was awesome. When I read it, I go, I got to have that book. And when I looked inside, it just got better. But anyways, I sorry, I keep breaking you up while you're trying to explain this trilogy. Now, what's the third one going to be like?
Third one it's actually going to the editor in the next week.
Oh,
and it is
congratulations.
ocean-based, and it's called Into the Mystery, where we follow that whisper beyond our comfort or control. And it leads us into a profound encounter that changes and transforms us, and where we finally find the wholeness we've been seeking all along.
Wow. And it brings you into the ocean, into oceans? Is that what you said? Wow.
It's all
you say in here, wind in the trees, that what I was mentioning earlier, when you're quiet and you hear that sound, and you say this connection. The forest shares much in common with the ocean. It's vast, full of life, and essential for the well-being of our planet. I didn't really think about that. I mean, I know that I'm a diver also, and so I do a lot. I wouldn't say a lot, but when I can, scuba diving and Turks and Caicos and these beautiful long dives. We were on a boat for 5, 6, 7 days at a time. But when I read that in your book, I go, he's right. This is a vastness here, different than the forest, but they both have these gifts, right? So now this last book is bringing us out into the ocean.
Yeah. Yep.
Are you doing any underwater things, or mostly on surface stuff?
I have some photos taken underwater. I mean, at aquariums.
Yeah.
Showing the underwater life. But
yes.
No, I haven't done any diving and photography together.
Yes. I look forward to that. And tell them a little about your studio, if anybody's out in the Rocky Mountain National Park in Estes. And Estes, people should visit Estes. And I love where your location of your studio.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I have a little gallery down in the center of town called Images of Rocky Mountain National Park. And everyone in town knows it. So if you're in town, just ask for it. They all know me. But so
and internet, Erik, where should we visit? What's the internet connection?
Yeah, I've got so many different websites.
Where can they buy these at least these two books?
Yeah, you can buy them. Tell you what, I'll send you to my own personal hub that links into all my different websites, because I run RockyMountainNationalPark.com. I run, different organizations, but it's ErikStensland.com.
Erik Stensland, just your full name.com.
unpack.com, and that'll bring you can order the books, you can find my other websites and videos and YouTube channel, and all of that stuff is on there. So
well, I'm going to ask everybody to visit it, and it's just you're just a treat. I couldn't do justice even trying to describe some of the beauty that's in here, but thank you so much. You're so gracious. And any parting words for our especially our young audience, because man, somehow I just want them to enjoy nature, to get out, to bridge the gap in their heart, and just relax a little bit. Just relax.
absolutely. Well, I would just say challenge yourself to be bold and courageous and buck the trend of what everyone else is doing. Put your phone away and make a practice of, once a week or once a day to just go for a walk by yourself in the silence and see what comes up. And don't be afraid of whatever comes. Anything that comes, you can handle by bringing out into the light, and you will see your life transformed as a result.
God bless you. Hey, thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Erik, thanks again, brother. Talk to you again soon, everyone. Bye-bye.